Kamala Harris is still in this honeymoon phase, and the Republicans have an opportunity to redefine who she is as a candidate. So, of course, all of the media is kind of riding this high and saying, oh, now the race dynamic has totally changed. We can do whatever we want to in the media with President Trump. And I'll say this too, the outcome was already decided on the headlines before he showed up. They knew what they were going to write about before he even opened his mouth.
I don't know when the media is going to learn to stop playing this game of chicken with President Trump. He's never been scared to have a conversation with any of them. He is going to go out and talk to people and go into communities where they don't think he belongs.
I say this is a dumpster fire for Rachel Scott, who didn't come in and ask one question. She threw like 6 things at the wall, like she was trying to beat him up.
All right, guys, I'm getting ready for the weekend. I hope you are too, but never a quiet day as we enter the close to 90-day stretch of this campaign. Big news. Trump reclaims the narrative last night. Yesterday afternoon, he goes to the National Association of Black Journalists. I want to talk to you about that. Roll call time. Harris, she's still going to get virtually nominated. She says she's going to announce her running mate by Tuesday. I'll tell you about that in just a second. Big prisoner exchange this morning. 2 Americans, Evan Gershkovich from the Wall Street Journal and Paul Whelan, are released. I don't get why. This is interesting. Meaning, what was Putin doing? What was he getting out of this? I'm not really sure what's happening. Maybe he's trying to put his finger on the election, but suddenly he's letting these 2 Americans out. Anyway, interesting on that. Newt Gingrich is here tomorrow, by the way. Make sure you set those notification buttons right now because Newt, as always, is going to deliver the goods. Before I get to that, I want to tell you about one of our great sponsors. You guys know I'm broken, man. I'm broken. I got knee issues, hip issues. But what do I do now? I got my gravity defiers. These are my training ones. If I go to walk, I go to the gym. I've got another pair for when I go running. Unbelievably comfortable. Total, like, it feels like you're jumping on a trampoline. Maybe that's because it's got Verso technology in it. That's the stuff they make trampolines with. This is an unbelievable game changer. If you're a walker or runner, you go to the gym. Tons of stability and support. They come with these custom orthotics that are unbelievable. You will not go back. I'm telling you, I've changed over. I wear the ones that I just showed you if I walk or run. The Gravity Defier shoes are like nothing I've ever worn before. Like, I'm not a fast runner, let's face it, but I do like to go for walks and jogs. It's not running. The Gravity Defier is unbelievable. And if you go to gdefy.com, you can get $30 off your order of $150 or more. Use code SPICER30. Go to GDEFY. I'm telling you, whether you're a walker, you just go to the gym, if you just want more stability when you go out there, you get tons of support and it helps your posture, which I need as well. Go to gdefy.com and use code SPICER30. All right, a lot to get to with the panel today. Tim Graham from the Media Research Center, he's going to join us. Roma Davari, she was on the Trump 2016 campaign, former director of strategic communications in the Trump White House. And then Luke Ball, he's the CEO of Mason Borough Strategies. They're all going to be with us. Before I do that, though, I tell you guys this every night. I'm all jacked up by the end of the day. I need some way to fall asleep. And you know what I have found? I've tried everything, by the way. I've tried magnesium. I tried melatonin. And finally, I found the secret sauce. It is Beam's Dream Powder, right? I take this at the end of the day. It's 2 delicious flavors. You've got the cocoa cinnamon, which I love, and then you've got the brownie flavor. Not bad either. Depends if you're more of a brownie person or a cocoa kind of cinnamon guy. I take a scoop of it. I put it in water. Some people have told me they like the milk. I guess it depends on what sits better with you. I fill it up, put it in the microwave for 30 seconds, stir it around, and I'm telling you, when you put your head down on the pillow 30 minutes later, you're out, right? It's not just got the magnesium and the melatonin. It's also got theanine, apogene, reishi. It's a total game changer. You fall asleep quicker, you stay asleep, and you don't wake up with any kind of grogginess. I love this stuff. I would drink it all day long if it didn't make me fall asleep, to be honest with you. It tastes that good. If you try it and you don't like it, you're lying. It is that good. If you want to try Beam's best-selling Dream Powder, athletes use it, tons of professionals use it. You can get 40% off for a limited time when you go to shopbeam.com/Spicer. Use code Spicer, shopbeam.com/Spicer. All right, I want to bring in the panel and break it all down for you. Lots to get to about his performance yesterday at the National Association of Black Journalists, plus the debate about debates. Let's bring in the panel and go for it. All right, gang. I looked at some of the news this morning, and everybody in the mainstream media, the left-wing legacy folks, are talking about the fallout from this National Association of Black Journalists conference that Trump did yesterday. Tim Graham, you guys monitor the media for a living there at the Media Research Center. What did you think overall of his appearance there, and then obviously the media coverage of it?
You have told 4 congresswomen of color who were American citizens to go back to where they came from. You have used words like animal and rabbit to describe black district attorneys. You've attacked black journalists, calling them a loser, saying the questions that they ask are, quote, stupid and racist. You've had dinner with a white supremacist at your Mar-a-Lago resort. So my question, sir, now that you are asking black supporters to vote for you, why should black voters trust you after you have used language like that?
Well, first of all, I don't think I've ever been asked a question in such a horrible manner. First question. You don't even say, hello, how are you? Are you with ABC? Because I think they're a fake news network, a terrible network. And I think it's disgraceful that I came here in good spirit. I love the black population of this country. I've done so much for the black population of this country.
Well, you have to start with the idea that he showed up. And of course, we would have suggested it's going to, they'll call it the Lion's Den. And yet, when the media report on it, they're sort of like, Trump was combative. Well, why don't you show how combative the reporters were? That's kind of mind-boggling to me. So I think that obviously a lot of voters would give Trump credit for going in and taking it on. What the networks didn't want to do is acknowledge that Kamala Harris skipped out of it. So apparently she'll be negotiating a Zoom call in September. But this just plays into the whole idea that Kamala Harris has been the presumptive nominee for 10 or 11 days. And where's the interview? Where's the press conference? I don't see Rachel Scott screaming at her. So, I mean, you can understand what he said about Kamala's race was going to get them all extremely agitated. But you also have to look at all the things that they omit, especially that she didn't show.
Yeah, so much to break down there. I'm literally going through my head like there's like 8 things. Let me just start with this for the group. Was it a good idea? Look, here's the thing, Tim. I agree with you. He shows up to things that most Republicans have never shown up to, right? He's gone to Detroit. He's gone to these places that Republicans traditionally haven't gone to. He goes to the National Association of Black Journalists. She starts the entire thing off by, let's address the elephant in the room. We hate you. Hey, thanks for the invite. I mean, can you imagine going to somebody's house and it's like, hey, thanks for the date cake.
The pity
Appreciate
invite.
You coming over.
The pity invite.
Right?
Total pity invite, because Trump has been saying anytime, anywhere, any place to Kamala. The media somehow turned that around on him, even though he had agreed to debate her. And so he shows up here.
Well, I'll get to the
slogan.
All right,
anytime, anywhere.
Romo, you're getting ahead of the. We're getting. I want to get to the debate, but I think that the idea that these guys invited him, he didn't just show up at their conference, and they're like, hey, let's address the elephant in the room. We hate you. So we don't like you. And I'm like, why did you ask me to come?
So
why
Sean,
did you want?
I don't think they thought he'd say yes. I think they wanted to walk into that conference and say,
there you go, Luke Ball with the win.
We invited President Trump, but he did not have time to come and present today. And so therefore we are extending a conversation to Kamala Harris to come and speak to us instead. But when he said yes, that put him in a weird place. But this is a theme of Trump. He's going to the Bitcoin conference. He's going to the Libertarian convention. He's going to all these places like Detroit in Michigan and going over to the Bronx that the Republicans normally would not go into. They would consider it a political coliseum. But he is saying, yes, I will show up and do this, which puts them in a weird position. All of the people on that panel knew that their future employers, because these are young journalists, would be looking back at this and saying, are they giving softball questions? Because as liberal media outlets, they're not going to allow anybody on that doesn't make their mark when they have the opportunity to go after the former president of the United States. So that was a job interview for the journalists who were sitting there. And for President Trump, it was a moment to say, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to show up because I do come and I speak to people who are outside generally the Republican tent to make sure my message gets out there.
I think, Luke, that was the answer, though. They didn't think he was going.
No.
They were like,
Right.
that was like, you know, when you invite somebody to the wedding because you just want the gift and you're like, oh, they live in Alaska. They're never coming.
I don't think even after he agreed to show up that they thought he was going to show up. They didn't have his mic ready. He's sitting backstage for half an hour, and when he shows up, he's like, oh, maybe I ought to get the guy a mic.
Yeah,
That's true.
absolutely. Sean,
Roma, let me ask you this though. Wait, hold on. But you were on the campaign in before you were in the White House. If that came to you as an invitation, and they said, "Hey, Roma, the president's been invited to address this conference," would you have recommended he go or not go?
I would. And look, Sean, I don't know when the media is going to learn to stop playing this game of chicken with President Trump. He's not scared. He's never been scared to have a conversation with any of them. We saw that nearly every single week in the press conferences that you held and the ones that he held himself at the White House. He is going to go out and talk to people and go into communities where they don't think he belongs, just like Luke said. So, of course, he's going to look at this and say, you know what? Great opportunity. My Bronx rally just went amazing in New York. There were tons of people there. The media hated it. So why not let's go have a conversation with them in their own backyard, in Barack Obama's backyard even, right? So he goes to Chicago, he meets with these people, and he knew the second they agreed to this, the campaign knew they were never going to get a fair shake. So of course he's going to go in there, guns blazing, ready to throw a few jokes around, just like President Trump does so well, and everybody loves to hear it too. But the media was never going to give him a fair shake when it came to the actual report coming out of this event.
So knowing the headlines that you've seen, Luke Ball, was it worth it? Did he get, I mean, they're all talking about how he addressed Kamala's race, whether she was black or not.
Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is only on the ticket because she is a black woman?
Well, I can say, no, I think it's maybe a little bit different. So I've known her a long time indirectly, not directly very much. And she was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black?
She is always
But you know
identified
what?
as a black woman.
I
She went to a
respect
historically
either
black
one.
college.
I respect either one, but she obviously doesn't.
Was this a good opportunity? Let's put it this way. Did he miss an opportunity?
No, I don't think so. I think that the American people have a short memory, first of all, when it comes to a lot of this stuff. We are several months out from the election. I think it shows a willingness on his part to just confront some of the folks on the left head on. This was classic 2015, 2016 Trump. I remember when all the media would react, harshly to things that he did back then, and yet it put him at the top of the polls because it showed somebody who was willing to go out there and be strong and brash, quite frankly. And so one of the major issues we're dealing with right now is our foreign affairs is abysmal. And when the leaders around the world are looking at how Donald Trump is coming into these hostile situations, he was not going to just go quietly and be politely and be run all over. He was going to show up and actually have these fire guns ablazing. So when you're put in these positions of confrontation, I think that it's not just for the immediate moment. Kamala Harris is still in this honeymoon phase, and the Republicans have an opportunity to redefine who she is as a candidate. So of course, all of the media is kind of riding this high and saying, oh, now the race dynamic has totally changed. We can do whatever we want to in the media with President Trump. And I'll say this too, the outcome was already decided on the headlines before he showed up. They knew what they were going to write about before he even opened his mouth. They knew it wasn't going to be a friendly conversation. I guarantee you that they knew ahead of time who the people who were interviewing him were going to be. And there were phone calls and text messages way ahead of him showing up saying, what are you going to ask? What are the questions you were going to present to him? And based off of that premise, they had already gone ahead and probably written the body of what they were going to say in their articles and part of the headline, because they wanted to make sure that they made this an entire media cycle trying to champion their liberal sphere.
You know, Tim Graham, you guys cover this. And the thing that I thought was interesting and why I want to get your perspective from the Media Research Center is this is the National Association of Black Journalists. They are supposed to be journalists, reporters, people who, you know, report the news for the most part. There's some columnists, et cetera, there. But when the first question is, we don't like you, doesn't that speak to the broader point of the media? Like, no kidding. Like, they're admitting what they're not supposed to admit. They say the quiet part out loud. We don't like you. We think you're offensive.
Well, we should say these groups, when they ally on racial terms, the National Association of Black Journalists, the National Association of Hispanic Journalists, or then there's the National Lesbian and Gay Journalists Association. These are affinity groups, but they're also advocacy groups. So they are not groups that organize for objective purposes. They are groups that organize to make everything more racially sensitive as they see it. Like the Hispanic journalist said, you can't say illegal immigrant, and then nobody does. I mean, so the Black journalists here are coming together, and it's all about, we need to get more Black journalists in the newsroom who are attacking Donald Trump. I mean, it's not at all surprising that a group of Black journalists was going to be just about the most hostile anti-Trump crowd you could find. And yeah, the questions that Rachel Scott, I mean, they said the Democrats are all saying this is a dumpster fire for Trump. I say this is a dumpster fire for Rachel Scott, who didn't come in and ask one question. She threw like 6 things at the wall, like she was trying to beat him up. And how is anybody supposed to answer it?
I think Luke brought this up. I felt like Rachel Scott was trying to prove her bona fides to her colleagues. Like, watch this. I'm going to come in and say everything in one sentence. It may be a long, that shows you guys that I'm tough as nails. And I'm going to say, you know, in 6th grade, you said this about little Johnny. And then in 12th grade, you did this. And then when you were, she was like, I'm going to unload on you. And I'm going to show everyone in this room that I'm tough. All the coverage afterwards, Tim, was how tough she is. And she was a great journalist. Her colleagues loved the fact that she came loaded for bear.
Sean, before Tim answers, let me reframe this a little bit too. Just put it in our position. If I was trying to get a job with the Republican Party or the Trump campaign, and I was given the opportunity to interview a liberal journalist, I would also come in probably with the same mentality to try to impress my bosses. That is a political advocacy group that she is trying to get a job with in the left-wing media. So that is why she had to come in there. It was not about journalism. It was about a resume.
Yes, I agree.
I would add to that, Sean, it's also about your colleagues liking you, both within ABC and around the national media in general. Rachel Scott has been, a lot of these reporters at ABC have just been D New York or D DC. They're Democrats all the time. I always want to put the party label on them.
Dude, I love this idea. I'm going to start, instead of saying Rachel Scott, ABC News, I'm going to put D ABC News. I mean, I think that's, I love that.
It's the way, it's really the way they sound. And so it is intended to be obnoxious. And Luke's right. It's this, hey guys, watch this. Like, I'm going to do this acrobatic routine on his head.
Just for the record, when you start seeing me do this, Tim Graham, implicitly know that I'm giving you credit because I won't publicly. Just know that Tim Graham, Media Research Center, I love this idea of D, NBC News, D, Washington Post. Roma, I want to ask you this, though, that I thought it was funny. One of the examples that Rachel Scott gives, she said, you called a black reporter nasty or something. And I'm like, have you watched Trump? I think he calls everybody nasty. I mean, show me a tape of Jim Acosta where he doesn't call him like a total loser. Like, he calls
he doesn't
everybody.
acknowledge the reporters are nasty.
Right. But the point is, it's not a black or white or brown thing. He calls them all losers.
Right, exactly. And the thing is, they're putting themselves in this situation, really. They're so openly partisan nowadays. I mean, even a few months ago, earlier this year, we had an NPR reporter blow the whistle on the entire organization, saying we don't have a single person in our newsroom to counter the left narrative. And nobody cared. The media didn't care. No one wanted to cover it. Of course, you covered it. People like Newsmax and Bannon's War Room, those are the only people who decided to put that information forward for the public, even though we all know that the media has been biased for the last 8+ years against President Trump since he came down the golden escalator. So if he's going to throw punches and they're going to act like they're this wounded child, I mean, I can't help but laugh and roll my eyes. Please, you know who you're dealing with here.
All right, guys, sorry to interrupt this conversation, but just like I interrupted this conversation, you don't know when things are going to get interrupted by a power outage. Maybe it's a natural disaster. Maybe it's a power line down for some random reason. Maybe it's a hit on our electrical grid. Maybe it's a day or an hour. Maybe it's a week, 2 weeks, or a month. We don't know. And that's why I like to be prepared. I've got a Patriot Power Generator 2000X in my house. If you go to 4patriots.com/Spicer, you can have one too. It's powerful enough to take care of all the big stuff, the refrigerator, the TVs, the tablets, the computers, medical devices. And it's awesome because it's powered off solar panels that come free with it. What does that mean? No running to the gas station, no hoping that the gas station is open, no wondering how long is this amount of gas going to last for, and the smell of gasoline and the noise that comes with the big power generator. This thing, no noise, you can bring it in your house, it's portable, I can lift it up, you can put it in your car, you can bring it to a friend's house, you can bring it to an outdoor event, but you are ready. So get the Patriot Power Generator 2000X by going to 4patriots.com/Spicer and be ready when something unexpected happens. All right, back to the conversation. I want to bring up a point of personal privilege here because Luke said something about the colleagues, and I want people to understand something that is so fascinating. When I was in the White House as press secretary, we had these events with foreign leaders, and Trudeau was coming to the White House one day. And so you would probe reporters. Hey, are you interested in asking a question today? That's how it worked. And Caitlin Collins, we chose her to ask one of the questions. She was then at the Daily Caller, now at CNN. And she asked a question about trade, right? Which you think about, hey, guess what? It's Canada. We trade a lot with them. Her colleagues destroyed her afterwards for not asking about Mike Flynn. And they wanted her to ask this question. And they literally went after her viciously. And that was it. That's the day Caitlin Collins turned from being a straight reporter to an advocate and ended up getting picked up by CNN. But that's the point that Luke is making about impressing their colleagues. Cannot be understated. And I mean, all of you guys know this, but I think the audience needs to understand they hang around in a bubble. They socialize together. I'm sure they go food shopping together and go to their, other events together. So to get the approval of your colleagues is critical. And to stray outside that bubble and the narrative is a social kill to you. So I just think that now, Tim, Roma brought up the debate, and I want to kind of walk into this a little because we'll talk about the debate on debates in a second. But Rachel Scott previewed, I think, how ABC News feels about Donald Trump. Why would you agree to go now on to ABC News and let them do a debate when they clearly that's what they think of Trump?
I think the hard part is you don't really have much of a choice.
Really?
I mean, because the Democrats aren't going to do Fox or Newsmax or the Sean Spicer debate.
They could.
So
open invitation right now.
Sean Spicer show debate.
That's all right. It's out there. I want to just pause for a moment and open invitation to the Harris campaign and to Trump. We will have you both at the day and time of your choosing. Okay, Tim, there you go. The invitation has been expressed.
Obviously, when Trump accepted these terms, he sort of played the same game he did with the NABJ. He did take this approach of ABC, fine. CNN, fine. Let's put Biden on stage and see how that worked out for the Democrats. So looks like a pretty good gambit. Everybody does know what kind of debate ABC is going to do. And, if we're going to unspool some conspiracy theories, maybe we should say Kamala Harris decided not to go the NABJ the minute that Trump did, because I think the difference in questions that if Kamala had shown up at the NABJ, it'd be something like this last Laura Coates interview on CNN, Laura Sugar Coates. And she asked Kamala, like, oh, I'm so impressed by your passion. You know, how do you deal with all this criticism of your race? I mean, and that's the kind of question she would have gotten. And the contrast would have been so stunning. And the standing ovations for Kamala would have been so embarrassing. They were all like,
yeah, and Sean, let's not forget that the first debate that President Trump had was actually the CNN town hall with Caitlin Collins. I mean, everybody remembers that moment. It was a complete debate. He didn't even need Biden up there. He didn't need anyone up there. He had CNN going after him, which was supposed to be a moment for the people of the nation to ask him questions. And instead, it was a chance for them to berate him on the public stage.
Yeah, and I know also in the communication sphere, it was kind of interesting to see Democrats have to actually do some communications work for once. After Joe Biden had his disastrous debate with Donald Trump, they were actually having to go out there and defend themselves against the journalists who were coming after him and saying, actually, we are going to sit in the briefing room and ask you tough questions. We are going to ask about Joe Biden's cognitive ability. 3 weeks ago, it was just the right-wing wackadoodles that were bringing this up. But, oh, now that it's on display for all the American people to see, we are forced to ask the question. And with that pressure, they ran that guy out of the campaign. So they're getting their reward in their mind in Kamala Harris. They're getting their bump and their boost. The final thing I'd say is that with respect to the ABC debate, I think that Trump going into this forum and having this conversation and being combative against an ABC journalist just might give the Trump campaign a little bit more leverage in negotiations for the ABC debate, because they can point back to that and say, what's your guarantee that we're not going to waltz into a coliseum and have this sort of treatment all the time? Maybe we'll just go over to another network. And all the execs go, no. We'll make all these concessions. We'll have all these things right here.
Okay, Luke, give me a concession. What would you, so right now, play your hand. Give me a concession that you could get from ABC News that you'd want.
They could definitely discuss the moderators. They could say, no, we don't want this person. Yes, we do want this person.
It's David Muir.
Yeah,
so it's David Muir.
It could be somebody a little bit better than what they experienced at the conference.
Martha Raddatz? George Stephanopoulos?
Right?
John Carl?
Yeah, well, so I think that if they could make any sort of just have some leverage, anything, they could use that to point back. But I don't think it's necessarily leverage for structuring the debate. I think they just want to make the ABC execs sweat a little bit. I think they're going to go over to another network and be like, oh, no, we'll go do a debate over here. We'll go do a debate over here. See what they bring back to the table is probably not going to be sufficient. I'm not saying that they can make some minor tweaks to the debate themselves, but these executives want the ratings. And they know that if they lose Trump, they lose those ratings. So they're going to come and throw everything at the kitchen sink, in my opinion, if they're trying to have these negotiations. And that puts the Trump campaign at least on somewhat of a better footing. I'm not saying that they necessarily go through with this particular network. Just says, well, heck, we saw how you're going to treat us here. We're going to go over to this network instead.
So I think two things. One, the deal that Trump made, I think Tim framed it perfectly. He made a deal to debate Joe Biden for a strategic reason, because he wanted to expose Joe Biden's fitness for office. He didn't make a deal with Kamala Harris, right? So if I offer a job to Roma to come do something and she says, says, okay, I take the job, and then I backed out, I'm going to sub in Tim Graham or Luke Ball. That's not how it works. You don't get to just sub in somebody for a debate.
Also important, Kamala is not the nominee yet. She is the presumptive nominee.
Yes.
So they can't agree to a debate with somebody. They said this weeks ago before there was even discussion about legitimately swapping out Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. They were like, we don't know who the Democrat nominee is going to be. So why would we set up a vice presidential nominee debate with J.D. Vance and Kamala Harris? And that turned out to be true. So you guys are pulling the switcheroo. Why don't we get everything nailed down before we start talking about logistics?
All right. So the second thing is, I believe, and this goes back to what Luke said, they got what they wanted, right? The media writ large, leftist blob wanted Joe Biden out. They succeeded. They're happy now with her. And the reason I bring this up is that they sort of, I think, will double down. If you're ABC News, the talking points are this: we now need to do everything we can to help Kamala. We need to take Trump down 5 notches. We throw everything but the kitchen sink at this guy. And so that's what I worry about. He can handle anything. I've heard that. I've seen the guy. It's not a question of what Trump can handle or not. It's a question of he's a negotiator. And I get what Luke's saying. Let me just ask this. Let's go around to handle the horn on a few things. Should he agree ultimately to the ABC News debate? Yes or no, Roma?
Yes, I think he should, because at the end of the day, President Trump and the Republican Party are widening their net farther than we have ever had before. And people that watch ABC, they're loyal to that network. So it's a great opportunity to make sure that they're hearing our message instead of ABC News lies that they've been getting for the last 8 years.
Tim, yes or no?
Yes, I think the negotiating place there is on topics. They really ought to say, we really would like you to discuss immigration. If you don't discuss immigration, I'm bringing it up anyway.
Yes, that's brilliant. All right. Luke Ball, does he agree to ABC or no?
Yes, but I think he can push it to a very inconvenient time where the ratings are not going to be as high, and also maybe not make it the first debate between him and Kamala Harris, so the ratings are lower.
Okay, and this is where I wanted to go with this. If I'm Donald Trump right now, I reopen the entire deal. This is very Trump, right? Okay, you want me to if we're going to renegotiate this, then let's get it all. I'll do ABC News September 10th with David Muir. And I agree with Tim. I think you make the negotiation about the topics. It's the economy, it's immigration, which, by the way, they'll still lie about. But I want a Fox interview or, the Sean Spicer show. He gets to get something else. He needs to force her to another debate, maybe 2, maybe 3. But I think this to him is an opportunity to go in and renegotiate all of the terms. Thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. And the topic issue is very important because we know that they're going to bring up anything they can from the past. If they want to talk about January 6th, fine. Let's also talk about the Black Lives Matter protests that destroyed tens of cities across the country. I mean, if you want to tit for tat that way, we can do it. As long as Kamala Harris has to answer those tough questions. She can call us weird all she wants, but let's ask the question about mutilating children without parental consent, right? Let's ask those very, very leftist extremist ideologies that we've heard from her. And she cannot just say, they have to push back. She cannot just say, oh, well, now I'm okay with fracking. That's not, you can't just decide, wake up one day and have a completely polar opposite view with no explanation. They have to push back on her. So if there isn't that, which I'm not going to hold my breath for, we do have to make sure that we have another chance to have someone else who will, like you said, Fox, Sean Spicer, etc.
I'm for that. I think the Media Research Center has put out some great videos contrasting her issues, which, again, I highly recommend you follow them because it just shows the thing. Let's talk about the attack, though, right? So the attack last night into this morning from the Trump team onto Kamala is very focused on her being a phony and a flip-flopper, okay? Do you guys think that that's the most effective attack on her, right? That she flip-flops on issues. I mean, Roma brought up fracking, right? Minnesota Freedom Fund. I want to let these Black Lives Matter folks out of jail, but I'm tough on crime. I mean, she is a phony person. Well, I don't think there's any question about that. Is that a good line of attack, though?
It's all about what she has flip-flopped from, pointing back to what she has said and then asking her, if you are so far left in your progressive ideology that you're saying that we need to eliminate energy jobs, we need to stop red meat consumption, we need to get rid of the filibuster to pass a Green New Deal, what has changed between you running in 2020 for the nomination and 2024 that is going to make us believe that you're actually legitimate in these issues? You accepted the mantle of the most liberal senator in the United States of America back then because you were trying to run to the left of your party. Why are you now suddenly trying to change that tune over the campaign trail to try to appeal to the American people? It's basically calling her out as a liar, number one. And number two, it is reminding the American people of the radical liberal senator that she was. So perhaps it's not necessarily the fact that she flip-flopped, but rather reminding the American people of what she flipped from, what she was saying that we needed to advocate for, what she was saying we needed to try to implement into political policy, and now reminding the American people of those things that she said to basically say you're either a liar or you are trying to shift right now to cover up all the things you said back in the day.
Yeah, and if I could just quickly jump on the end of that, I think what Luke mentioned is perfect. It's not just about what she said, it's about what she did. And the Biden-Harris administration, it's not just the Biden administration, it's the Biden-Harris administration. So anything that they have done over the last 3.5 years, she needs to be held accountable for. If she said something different than what they did, tell us why. And what are you going to do differently in the future? I mean, that's That's the honesty that the American people deserve, and they're not getting it from this administration.
Yeah, to put that in terms of pronouns, it's not his agenda, it's their agenda. And I think that's absolutely right.
They,
I mean, no, seriously though, like
Agenda hers.
I gotta use words that they can identify with. But it's their agenda. It's not his agenda. And we need to, but let me just ask you this, like, Tim, let me reframe this. Is it better to attack her as a phony that flip-flops? So you've been on both sides of fracking, or is it better to attack her on policy straight up? You're anti-fracking.
I think the phoniness works. You got to remember, the Republicans know who they're voting for. The Democrats know who they're voting for. And I think that the problem you have with voters in the middle is they don't always have policy ideas. And they'll say, I vote for the man or the woman and not the party. So I think if you do undermine her as, gosh, she's kind of a phony, she's a chameleon, Kamala chameleon, that's something that needs to be pushed out there. So that can't hurt. But also, all the things they don't want you to talk about, like her cackling at weird times. There's a bunch of these things about her personality.
That's racist and sexist that you said that.
Yeah. Well, everything critical you say of her is apparently racist and sexist. That's why they love that she is running. But I think, obviously, here, the fact that she's not doing any media shows they're just as afraid of her in these interviews and debates as they were afraid for Biden.
I feel like we've got to hone that message in, though. We've got to pick one thing and go straight at it, because I felt like the last week was very scattershot when it came to how we're going to message against her. Luke, I mean, where do you come down on the phony flip-flopper versus the laser focused on how extreme and dangerous her issues are?
Yeah, it might have felt a little messy. We were resetting the Monopoly board. We were trying to get all of our pieces in play to make sure that we understood what the attack was. You got to also remember, all of the firepower politically has gone against Joe Biden and his record over the last few years. It is true that it is the Biden-Harris ticket, but you also have to make sure that you are attacking Kamala on the specific things that she has done and said over the last little bit. So there need to be polls in the field. There need to be polling of swing state voters, of independents, to figure out like what issues they're most important on and how Kamala has addressed them in the past. So I think that the messaging is going to get tighter within the next week or so. I think that she has experienced this honeymoon bump. That was a period of time where the Republicans just simply weren't going to win for a few days as she rode this high, because there's not any message that was necessarily going to get through this historical switch that the Democrats had on their ticket. But as that fades away, you've got, although it is short in the time span of this has been the longest campaign in history, or the general campaign in history, 3 months is an eternity when it comes to having to redefine people. And just look no further than October surprises that have happened over the last few election cycles. So I think that as the Republicans tighten their message and figure out what exactly works, the arguments are going to be compelling against their opponent. And they're going to be reminded that this might be some energy right at the beginning, but it's also compounded by the fact that a lot of the people that are showing up to her, like Atlanta rally, weren't there for Kamala. They were there for Megan Thee Stallion or whatever, for a free concert, and then left out of the parking lot as Kamala took the stage. So as the messaging gets tighter, then we're going to see what actually works in the polls leading up to that. The testing is going to be vetted thoroughly, and they're going to make sure that they know exactly what the issues that the voters are thinking about is going to resonate in November.
Yeah, I think that's important, that we make sure that we know. And it's funny, someone asked me this morning after yesterday, very left, they said, is the race over? I go, have you paid attention in the last couple of weeks? The guy got attempted assassination. The court ruled in his favor on immunity. I mean, boom, 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 boom. I think you couldn't make up what happened the last 20 days, politically speaking. And now you want to know if it's over? Holy smokes. We got 97 days to go. Roma, the thing that I find fascinating about the attacks coming inbound from them, and you saw it yesterday with Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, to the extent that he has talked about it, has brought up, they're talking about Project 2025, this Heritage Foundation think tank group of people that are coming up with policies. Okay. I feel like, wow, if that's what you got, you're literally going after a think tank on the right saying, you guys are coming up with issues that's what you do. You're a think tank, and trying to associate him with Trump, who's denied being like, that's the best you got. I'm going, okay.
Right, exactly. The best you got is attacking a think tank for doing what their job is to do, one that has no affiliation with the president, as he said repeatedly. So it's so weak. I mean, they are flailing already. It's only going to get worse over the next 96 days. And frankly, the more that we talk about her record, the more they're going to have to defend themselves, which means they can't be talking about us and spreading more lies like they love to do. So let's talk about the fact that Kamala Harris herself said that she was the last person in the room when Biden made the call to pull us out of Afghanistan.
President Biden always said that he wants you to be the last person in the room, particularly for big decisions, just as he was for President Obama. He just made a really big decision, Afghanistan.
Yes.
Were you the last person in the room?
Yes.
And you feel comfortable?
I do.
Her video can be replayed over and over and over. And by the way, she does chuckle at the end of it, as she loves to do. She likes to laugh off very serious issues like pulling our troops out of Afghanistan and having people hang off of the side of an airplane getting stuck there. I mean, she is responsible for these things. And we cannot let the American people forget that she was she was the partner in the lead cover-up that we just saw unveil on the debate stage, right? So if we're going to talk about all of the things that she's done, she has hid Joe Biden's cognitive decline from the American people. That's the number one thing that I think of when I think of Kamala Harris, the fact that she lied every single time she was asked about her running mate. She lied every single time. She said he's smart as ever. He's quick on his feet. He's always in the game. I mean, some of the things she says, I don't even know what they mean, frankly. To take a page out of President Trump's talking points there, he didn't know what Joe Biden meant. I don't understand half the things Kamala says. I mean, she really is just flailing half the time. So the more we can talk about her record, the more they have to defend it. And then we can bring to light all of the lies that people have been told over the years.
You know, the out of Politico this morning, we got a brand new polling from Public Opinion Strategies, which is a Republican polling outfit. Let me tell you what it is. 5 battleground states. Kamala Harris, 48, Trump, 45 in Pennsylvania right now, before we even talk about VPs. Wisconsin, Harris, 48, Trump, 46. Arizona, Trump, 48, Harris, 43. Nevada, Trump, 46, Harris, 45. Michigan, 45 apiece. Tim, I get the sugar high, the honeymoon. Does this, I mean, the race has tightened in the battleground states. There's no question about it. I think when we removed Joe Biden, his fitness for office issue from the table, which is what most Democrats are concerned about, the race tightened. I don't think that's a shock. But does it stop there? I mean, she's got a VP pick and a convention coming up, which should kind of give her a little bump each time. Are you concerned?
Sure, but once again, they're probably going to be afraid of her being scrutinized. What does she say in interviews and press conferences? Even what does her speech say? You know, I think all of these things are grist for the Republican machine. You know, they can message on everything she has to say. You know, the issue they really haven't touched is this bail fund. You know, the fact checkers now have tried to say, oh, she didn't do this. I think that's the kind of issue that you can expect Trump to go for, is to say, excuse me, when you start talking about January 6th, and he really could have done it yesterday.
Oh, that would have been great.
Kamala's for bailing out rioters, so I don't know what you're trying to.
Oh God, Tim Graham, I hope they're watching. I know that, well, I used to call it the Biden campaign. We've seen how many clips the Biden campaign of this show has put up. I hope the Trump people, that's a brilliant strategy. I think they should, every time they talk about January 6th and what you call them, say, really? Because here's the Minnesota Freedom Fund. Here's her talking about bailing out people that did all these destructive things. Oh my gosh, another home run, Tim Graham.
Well, they've never wanted you to associate January 6 riots with post-George Floyd riots or Ferguson riots or other racial riots. The media glamorizes those. They call them rebellions and reckonings. NPR endorses a book called In Defense of Looting. That's who these people are. So that's where every time they start lecturing about January 6th, you got to go hard back at them.
I love that. I love that. Luke, does the polling concern you now, or do you think it's still just a sugar high?
It has tightened, but again, the Republicans have not had an opportunity to define Kamala Harris. I think that as things settle down over the next few weeks, Democrats are going to realize that they're probably just celebrating a statistical tie. And in a lot of the battleground states, things are not going to shake out in the direction that they want them to go. I'm interested to see who the vice presidential candidate is, but on issues like Tim was just talking about with the Minnesota Freedom Fund, people need to be reminded of the things that she stood for. They need to be seeing the entire tweet that she put out saying that we need to support these people on the ground bailing folks out. To the Minnesota Freedom Fund issue, I think that's one of the greatest and most compelling arguments, because Donald Trump put out a video just a few days ago showing all of the people that have been released by the fund but then went on to commit other crimes, including aggravated assault. I think one of them was arrested on kidnapping and assault and then was released by the fund. The head of the fund said he doesn't even look at the charge before he bails somebody out. That is her record. It is lawlessness. It is an abdication of law and order. Then go down and start talking about the border czar. And I love how the research center has put out the clips that are side by side of one media outlet saying she is the border czar, and then a couple years later saying she was never the border czar, with the same chyron or the same outlet name on the video clip. The double back and forth there is just brilliant.
Meantime, Vice President and border czar Kamala Harris facing some backlash.
What he said about Harris and immigration was not true. She was never appointed border czar.
And this will be her first visit to the U.S.-Mexico border region since she was appointed as the border czar by President Biden.
People gonna have to counter the misinformation. You already hear folks talking about the border czar. She wasn't the border czar.
President Biden tapped Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris, to be the border czar.
Now, she wasn't the border czar. That's what Republicans labeled her.
They were very critical of Kamala Harris, especially in her role as border czar.
Now what she's up against is folks lying about her border record, calling her a border czar.
Kamala Harris, who was appointed as the border czar.
If you can let the border czar thing percolate, tie it to the law and order issue, and point back to the fact that she was the one who was on the top of the ticket when we had this abysmal economy that is not hitting Americans the correct way, I think those are going to be compelling arguments. And at the end of the day, folks are going to see when they go into the voting booth that they're not doing as well as they were now and they were under Donald Trump. And James Carville said it best: you can't give the American people stats and numbers and tell them the economy is doing better. They have to actually feel that. And so maybe once the sugar high fades away, they're going to start to look at the realities of what this economy has actually delivered for them.
I think the MRC, I said this before, but the brilliance of it was John Carl at ABC saying Republicans are falsely accusing of her of being the border czar. And then there's a clip of ABC News saying Kamala Harris, who's the border czar. The complicity of these guys and covering up for her shows no bounds.
And you got to ask, are you lying now or were you lying then? Which one?
I think that it underlines that Kamala never wanted the job. She thought that was, a bucket of warm spit. She didn't want it. So she's going around to reporters going, I didn't want to be border czar. I wasn't the border czar.
She didn't want to be vice president to Joe Biden. Let's go that far. I mean, she called him a racist on the debate stage, and I think she meant it. I mean, it might be the only honest thing she ever said.
It was hurtful to hear you talk about the reputations of two United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country. And it was not only that, but you also worked with them to oppose busing.
Actually, but see, the beauty of her words is that it's not us saying something about her or ascribing an adjective to her and saying she's liberal or whatever. Here's what she said. Do you agree or disagree? And I think that the idea of saying, every time the media brings up January 6th, saying, really, because she wants to bail out these people, here's her advocating for this. How come you've never asked that question to her?
Exactly.
Right? I think that's a brilliant strategy. And I also think, to Roma's point, you want to talk about race? You accused Joe Biden of being a racist and a segregationist. You somehow overcame that. I mean, they love to make these charges. And I think that the more we can just show her video over and over again on these issues, the more effective that is, because nothing gets through to people like, wow, when I showed someone the MRC video the other day, they were like, wow, the media really is complicit. It wasn't me saying it. I said, I want you to watch a video that the Media Research Center has put out. And they looked at it and said, wow, it really is that bad. It wasn't me describing it. It's what you guys did to show people. Those words are impactful. And the more we can show her doing that. So I love the conversation, guys, today. I think it's a lot of great ideas. Hint, hint, Trump folks, watch this and implement it. Because I think Tim Graham and Luke and Roma have some great messaging ideas that might work. Anyway, I appreciate you all tuning in. Tomorrow, a great conversation with the 50th Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. He's got some advice as well about the way forward. You're not going to want to miss that. He always delivers. Plus, remember to subscribe. Hit that notification button because we will go live when breaking news happens. The morning meeting is every morning at 9 on my YouTube channel live. You get to hear me, Mark Halperin, and Tim Hogan give you a preview of what's coming up that day. Plus, go sign up for my Substack, SeanSpicer.com, so you get the latest twice a week. And it's all free. That's the best part about it. We'll see you back here tomorrow on The Sean Spicer Show. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.